It's another guest, quite special today because we have not particularly a South African jazz artist, but a South African adoptee, if I may call him that. Today we have Todd Moultrie, who has been, I'd say, making waves in our local jazz spaces, but beyond that, just our local music space. How are you, Todd?
I'm great, brother. How you doing, man? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing good, man. I'm really excited to just get to know you a bit better and I guess kind of break down the concept and the man behind it.
Nice, man. Yeah, it's always a mystery. A lot of people think Jazz Groupies is a band, or they don't know where I'm based. So it's always a little bit of element of mystery. So yeah, it's great to let everyone know what's going on with Jazz
Yeah.
Groupies.
Yeah, I think particularly for our South African audience, because for some reason you just boom in this side, eh?
Yeah, I can't explain it, man. It's an honor. It's the greatest thing ever. But I don't know how it happened. It's just divine, I guess.
Yeah, and we're really grateful. I think particularly in our jazz spaces, because I think South African jazz sound is kind of journeyed towards a certain sound and concept. And when you guys come along, and guys like Soul as well, like we mentioned, and you bring this contemporary feel to the music, we really appreciate that change to sound, if I can call it that.
Yeah, and it's great to know that there's people out there, or there's a generation out there that is still appreciating the roots of jazz, but also know that there's still a lot more that is left in the music, and there's a
Yeah.
lot more discovery left in the music. It doesn't just have to stay a certain way to be a thriving genre.
Um, so before we even go anyway, just tell me real quick, yeah. There's an album I discovered titled Ballers by 504 Boys. Were you part of that production?
Yeah, yeah. I when I first started
Wow.
producing back in 1999, early 2000, I
Yeah.
was one of my first big placements was working with Master P on the 504 Boys album with him, Currency, and a guy named Paparu. Just a whole No Limit camp. It was really a great experience.
I, I just when I saw the name, I'm like, there's no one else. I just saw on producers credits, I saw Todd. I'm like, this is the Todd.
Yeah, yeah. That's how I started, man. And the funny thing is that beat the placement that I got with Master P, because I was trying to make jazz back then in the early 2000s, but where I was at in South Texas, it's more of a hip hop. It was the 90s and the early 2000s were just a time for hip hop, and I was in the area where there was not a lot of people that were trying to do like jazz and neo soul and R&B or any type of fusion music. So that beat for Master P started off as a jazz song that I tried to get some artists to work on. About a year went by, nobody wanted to touch the beat. So I basically stripped everything but the drums and started from scratch, and then it ended up in the hands of Master P, and that's my first placement was a jazz beat,
Wow.
but it was a hip hop song.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, I mean, if you were producing an album back in the early 2000s, 2002, particularly for this album. So I'm guessing this music thing has been with you for a while. Where would you first trace it back to?
Always gonna start with my father, my late father. He was a gospel singer, and locally he sang in a lot of these back in the 80s and the 90s. They had these mass choirs. You probably seen like James Cleveland and a lot of the big gospel
Yeah,
artists back
yeah.
then. So he was part of a local mass choir minister. So we grew up in the gospel roots and in a church. But he also was an incredible jazz lover. Um, had a lot of first issues of John Coltrane and Miles
Mm.
Davis, and he really, really tried to just, share the culture with me and my sisters when I was a kid. So I think that's where it really started is a combination of, his gospel roots and also him sharing that jazz culture and his love of jazz with us. It just really left an impact on me.
And in this period of your life, when you've been exposed to all this music based on your father's influence, are you thinking this is really cool, or are you going even further and thinking, wow, this is something I'd like to find myself doing as well?
Not so much then. It was really when probably when I got into hip hop that I really said this is something I wanted to do. I was really amazed at hip hop music in the '90s. The sampling, I thought it was just the most amazing thing to take a record and recreate it, sample it, chop
Yeah,
it up, and
yeah.
make it a whole new record. I was blown away by that. So that was really what made me say, "All right, I wanna figure out how I can be, a producer or a beat maker. I want to do this too."
And how do you go about this figuring out what route do you go with?
I had there was a lot of people in my neighborhood that were rappers. So that was one of the things that I said. I was like probably 11 years old, and I
Yeah.
said, there's a lot of people. Everyone I know wants to be a rapper, but nobody wants to make the beats. Who's going to make the beats for them? So that
Yeah.
was my first thought: is how can I fill a gap? Something that
Yeah.
was needed. Then I told my parents, and they got me a Casio keyboard. I
Yeah.
still, there were not a lot of resources in the 90s and 80s like there are now for if you want to be a producer. That was even not a lot of people, older than us that understood it. So, for me telling my parents that I wanted to make beats, they didn't really understand that concept. So they got me a Casio keyboard. I played around with it for some years. I figured out it was not the type of keyboard I really needed. I needed, a
Yeah.
drum machine and all that kind of stuff. They just got an affordable for them Casio
Affordable. Yeah.
keyboard. So I was grateful for that, but that was really my start is that Casio keyboard, and just really messing around with manipulating the sounds on that and trying to make beats out of it, but it really wasn't a sequencer or anything. So that was my introduction. I'd say about 11 years old, that Casio keyboard.
And would you say this thought process of um I see everyone trying to be on the forefront, but who's the guy at the back end? Do you think that has anything to do with perhaps your personality and not wanting to
Oh yeah,
be at the front?
yeah. I'm actually I did like a career assessment a while back, and
Yeah.
I was like 70% introverted. So I think that has a lot to do with it, being such a huge introvert, and also not wanting a lot of attention.
Mm,
And also for me, also it to me, beat making is there's a science to it. There's a element of like exploration that I was really into. I think that's my personality too. So all that kind of
mm.
combined is what led to me saying, this is the perfect place for me to be.
And I think you have continued with this at the back end personality thing to date, because I mean anything Jazzgroupiez doesn't have your face to it.
Absolutely, yeah. That
Yeah,
was a plan. It was the plan. I wouldn't say that was like a plan as far as like a business model, but
yeah,
for me, it was just the plan going into Jazz Groupies because I never wanted it to be about me. I wanted it to be about the culture because as a creator and an artist and anybody with a gift, the gift isn't for me. It's for the people that enjoy the gift. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't want to make it about me. I don't I can care less if anybody sees me, knows what I do. I love that element of it. I truly
Yeah.
love the fact that I can kind of just live a separate life outside of Jazz Groupies, and it helps me keep balance with my family and wife and kids as well.
Yeah. And back to those early days of you having the Casio keyboard and learning how to start essentially. How do you then move from you starting to learn of the sounds to you actually saying, I want to make music or I want to make the beats?
So it was my senior year of high school, and we do the career day, and they ask you what you want to do, and that was really a revealing moment for me because I didn't really think about what I wanted to do. I'll
Yeah,
just know that I wanted to create music, but a lot of us going into it, we don't really understand how do you make money doing it though. How can
yeah,
you make a career? I think that's the biggest problem with a lot of us going into wanting to be a musician or a producer is that we want to do it, but we don't always understand, okay, how do we do it and make a living we don't learn
Yeah,
that
out of it.
in our teenage years. We usually learn that in the process by bumping our head. So,
Yeah.
but long story short, career day, I was like, okay, I want to be a producer. And I told my parents, that's what I wanted to do. So, my dad, he talked about, hey, when you graduate, you get a job, you can stay here. We'll build your studio in
Yeah.
your bedroom. I was the last kid in the house, so it was, they were going to be fine with me staying there. But then I found a college in Dallas, Texas area. I had a friend right after high school. He called me from Dallas. We went to high school together, and he called me and said, "Hey, there's a music program at this college in Dallas. I
Mm.
know you said you wanted to be a producer. Why don't you check this out?" And a week later, I was in Dallas, living with my sister, enrolled in that college, and
Wow.
that was my that was my start. That was literally my start. About a month after high school, I didn't have not one plan in the world. My friend called me, and he said, "Hey, there's a college with a music program,"
And a
and
week later, you were there.
that was it. And a week later, I was in Dallas, living with my sister, and got a job and everything. So that was my start to my journey where I'm at right now.
But hearing you talk, it sounds to me like there was no reluctance to help you pursue this dream back at home.
No, there wasn't. I think my parents did what they knew, and they did what they could to support me. And they offered me options, but they also left it up to me to make that decision. And I eventually, even going to that music program, I left and went to Dallas for a year.
Yeah.
During that program, that music program, I had a class. It was a business of music class, and everyone in the class, you were a CEO. The class basically was, for a semester, you're going to be the CEO of your own record label. You're going to go and find a music act and produce a song. We're going to bring it all back. We're going to vote on the favorite songs and put an album out. And we
Yeah.
produced the album from start to finish, the entire class. And the song that I went to my hometown. I knew some friends that were rappers. I didn't have any music equipment, but the studio that we were working out of was a friend of my father. He was a music director at our church.
Okay.
He produced the beat for me. We brought the song back, and it was it was the top song on that album. Class loved it, and that basically told me I'm leaving school and I'm going to go back home and work with these artists and the people in my local area. And I felt something, and
Yeah.
I don't regret that decision. But yeah, I dropped out of school and went back, and that was it. I wanted to be a musician full time from that point.
And tell me, I know you. I think I've heard you speak of a story where after your dad passed on, you then fell back in love with jazz. If I'm quoting you right. So just tell me a
Yeah.
bit about that and what influence your dad might have had directly to the music you are making now.
Oh man, yeah. So, fast forward, dropping out of school, going back home, trying to figure out how I can be a producer. I got a job. I saved up enough money by living at home and got my first real keyboard and a drum machine. I got student loans and got a drum machines. I lived on the dorms in my hometown
Yeah.
just so I can get enough student loan money, because they give you more student loan money if you live on campus. So
Oh,
I
okay.
wanted to get enough student loan money to buy a drum machine.
Yeah.
So I did all this kind of, trying to tweak things and figure out how I'm going to get equipment. And
Mm.
then, so long story short, so after all that, I started to see some success a few years later. Now, we're talking probably early 2000s. I'm starting to see some, people wanting my beats. I'm learning how to work equipment. I found a mentor in Houston that was a successful producer in the Houston area. And my dad, even though he was a minister and really, really a man of faith, I was doing hip hop, and a lot of it had a profanity, and he didn't really listen to it, but he
Mm.
supported me, and I thought that was amazing for him, because there was a big concern of mine that he wouldn't support it because I was dealing with hip hop and there was a lot of profanity and
Yeah.
the different elements that he didn't agree with. But he supported me. He was my biggest supporter. When the Master P record came out, we went to the store to grab it. You know, it was amazing for him to open up a CD and see my name in it. But right around that time, you know, when I started to see the success, I was looking around and looking at my conditions, and I was saying to myself, you know, I'm doing this records for Master P. I was at the time working with an artist that was working with Matthew Knowles, Beyonce's father in Houston. We were at their studio working a lot. But I was living in my car. You know, I was trying to figure it out and be a producer. But I said, you know, I'm doing all these great things and I'm fighting for payments. You know, most of the time people didn't want to pay you as a new producer. And even if they did, you know, I started after I graduated college. I was thinking, you know, there's no health insurance. It was not a good time
Yeah.
for me to be a producer. I mean, I needed more in my life outside of just the music. I needed a place to stay. I needed security, and I was burnt out. I got burned out because with those Master P deals and some of those great deals, I didn't have a manager. I didn't have an attorney, so I tried to do a lot of that stuff myself,
Yeah.
read contracts myself, and I burned myself out in the process. And I got hopeless, and I just left it. I got tired. It was I was dealing with a situation where a big name artist locally in Houston, really huge artist at the time. I was working with him. He had made some promises after we finished his album. He would pay me once he got his advance, and I did a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and never got paid. And that was just kind of that straw that broke the camel's back. I said, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm tired of, you know, fighting for payments and working with
Yeah.
artists and lies and things. And so I just walked away, sold all my equipment. I had got a job, and that's how I ended up in Omaha, Nebraska, with my job that I got after I quit music.
After you quit, yeah.
And
Uh,
in that time, you know, my dad had passed away. We're talking now it's 2009, 10. My father passed away, and it was just a rough period. So you know, all that time, I always listen to jazz, but very, very, very casual. So now we're talking 2010 when my dad passed away. I just started listening to a lot more jazz to connect with him. And that was just the way that I was just kind of searching and for closure and healing and dealing with his passing. And that's how I discovered Robert Glasper. I was just, you know, I started listening to a lot of jazz, and I heard Robert Glasper and a lot of other people around that time, 2010 to 2013. And I was like, wow, so you can make jazz and it can still have a hip hop feel to it,
yeah.
and people love this. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, all right, what is this? You know? And I was blown away, man. I was blown away, and even at that time, I still didn't say, oh, I want to start making this kind of music. No, I just wanted to be a fan, and I was really,
Yeah.
really enjoying just being a fan of music at that time. I had no desires to make beats ever, you know. It was just this new jazz that I had discovered that probably, you know, had been out there, but I was just so amazed by, you know, people like Robert Glasper, Terrace Martin. There was a guy, Daryl Reeves in Atlanta. He has been quiet for a while, but you know, just discovering that new genre and sound of jazz, I was blown away. I had to have it.
And before we then get into the concept of jazz groupies and you coming up with this concept, just tell me a bit. How long were you in the college? Was it a year or 2 years?
So I spent a year in the college music program, and then I dropped out of that college for after a year. And then when I moved back home to my parents' house, I was just wanting to do music and got a job, and that's all I was going to do. But then about a year of that, I said, okay, I need to go back to college. You know,
Yeah.
you getting a little bit of pressure from your family, just questioning, hey, you know, what's your life going to look like?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was great. That's the greatest thing. I'm glad that they challenged me. So I went back to college for, you know, criminal justice. While I
Yeah.
was doing my music, I went to college. I worked and I drove to Houston probably 3 or 4 nights a week to work in the studio. So
Oh.
I was probably up like 20 hours a day. Maybe 3 or 4 times a week I had 20-hour days where I was, you know, at work, at school, then drive to Houston, go to the studio all day. So, but I ended up graduating for after about 4 years of my bachelor's degree.
And particularly the 1 year which you spent studying music, do you think there's much you got to take from that, just being around other creatives as well?
Yeah, that was cool. I really was able to kind of get to measure your talent and see
Yeah,
at that point in that year, you kind of see, all right, do people gravitate to what I'm trying to do, or is it a lost cause, or is it
yeah,
just, you know, do I need to kind of, figure out what direction I want to be as a musician or producer, whatever. And it was all of the affirmations that I needed, or confirmation that I needed during that 1 year, because I just felt
mm,
like people supported what I was doing, like my family supported it, my peers supported it, the groups that I try to go back and work with in at my hometown, they were asking for more and really like, encouraging me to keep going. So that year meant everything to me, probably being here right now, 20 years later, producing music.
yeah. I guess it can go a long way. I mean, being around other people who are your peers and who are doing what is similar to what you're doing, and just seeing, I guess, as you say, measuring yourself against them. I can imagine it goes a long way.
Yeah. And the other thing is, it was every genre of music. This wasn't
Yes.
just, all right, I'm going to school to,
Yeah.
like, Berkeley or somewhere where it's just jazz or classical training. No, this was rock, hip hop, and folk music, everything. Every all walks of life. It wasn't just all one race of people. No, I was probably me and a couple of other black guys. It was white
Yeah.
kids. It was all nationalities, all sexes, everything.
Yeah. Creativity does come from creative spaces.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm very thankful for that experience. And putting out a CD too at
Yeah.
at
That
18,
that kind
18
of
years
affirmed
old.
it for you.
At 18 years old, in a generation where I mean, we're talking the 2000s, where it was not cheap to put out a CD,
Yeah.
and it wasn't easy. You was no home studios back
Yeah.
then, like it was now. So this wasn't. There was a huge motivational thing to complete a CD, see the whole process from the mixing aspect, the mastering, the artwork, everything. I mean, I think that helped me so much to be an indie musician too,
Mm.
because I understood the whole process, the artwork, the mixing, the mastering, what you should and shouldn't do in those processes. Yeah, what to expect. Yeah, that really did help me. Like 20 years later, as an independent musician, in a whole new realm of music.
And now going into the concept, well, the initial concept of jazz groupies, what was it that you wanted to get out of the concept, and why the name?
So the time, so we're talking about 2013. My job had, my dad had passed. My job had transferred me to uh, Omaha, Nebraska, which, if you're not familiar with the U.S., it's more of the Midwest, up, northern part of the U.S.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of culture there. There's not a lot of black culture,
Mm.
like there is in the South. So for me, I was while I was there, I was single at the time, so I was searching for obviously jazz, but I was also searching for culture. So what I
Mm.
found myself doing a lot of times is I would leave Omaha on my days off to go to travel and go to jazz shows, or just any city that I thought had that jazz type vibe.
Yeah.
Chicago, New York, New Orleans. But then I also started thinking, like, within that, what about these other cities that have cool jazz scenes, but they just not probably popular, like
Yeah. Yeah.
Kansas City. Houston has a little bit of a jazz scene. Dallas, there's a whole bunch of cities. Atlanta, there's a whole bunch of cities that have jazz scenes, but no one outside of those cities really know or support or champion the scene. So that was what I started doing during that time. And in that time, I saw Robert Glasper in St. Louis perform for the first time, and I was blown away. And then meeting him after the show, talking to him, finding out his dad is from my hometown, us going to the bar. He's like, "Hey, let's go have a drink, talk some more." So we went to the bar. We just talked and chatted for about 30 more minutes about being, because he's from Houston as well. His dad's from Beaumont, my hometown. So I didn't know all that. We just connected.
Yeah.
And so then I started from that connection. If Robert Glasper was in Seattle, I flew to Seattle to see him. I flew to New York to see him. But then I started looking for other artists too and flying to see them and just spending a week or a weekend indulging in jazz. And I told myself during that time, I said, I feel like a groupie. Because I really didn't know any, like, here's the random guy flying to a city by himself just to soak up the jazz scene, doesn't know any of the musicians. Usually, most of the time I would stop by after the shows. Then that was one of the other things I really appreciated about the jazz culture, is that, the musicians were so down to earth after the show. Hey, it always happens. I know they're busy and they meet thousands of people, but for them, that's the connection is so important to a lot of jazz musicians, the human connection. So I call myself a jazz groupie. I said, I'm like a jazz groupie. And so it kind of stuck. And then this was at the beginning of IG, where Instagram was starting to get popular. Facebook was already pretty popular. And I was like, what if I share my photos from all these shows that I'm going to on like an IG page? And I just start this IG page where I share the culture. And the other part that I liked is, and I didn't know, that there's two sides of jazz. There's a one traditional side of jazz where people like to use the term the jazz police or the gatekeepers. And you have to have a suit and a tie, and you have to be stuffy, and you have to know every John Coltrane album, and you have to be able to talk the language. But then there's this other side, this hip side of jazz, I thought, or underground side, where it was more the casual fan, a younger generation, cooler, and more rebellious against the traditional side a little bit too. I mean, they respect it, but I think it was just I feel like the new generation was trying to push the culture forward, but it was being held back by a lot of traditions in a lot of ways. And that's what I wanted Jazz Groupies to be, a place. I wanted to build a platform where you could bring both of those generations of jazz fans together, and we can create like a whole new vibe, where we do what we want. Like, this is not just jazz. This is Black music. It's, that's what jazz is. Jazz is Black music, and we can't let gatekeepers come and tell us what our music should sound like. And that was what I wanted Jazz Groupies. It was almost like a rebellious platform to where we can say, what, like, traditions are cool and we respect them, but this music can go so much further, man. And we're restricting the music and the sound, and we're letting people not from the culture almost call the shots. If you think about your jazz publications, they don't look like me and you. You think about your jazz, the owners of these Downbeat and Jazz Times, your jazz clubs. How many Black-owned jazz clubs? I'm in the States, I didn't see many. You think about jazz record labels. How many of them are owned by Black people? So it's just a lot of other things. I thought, the music is filled with, the Black creators, but we don't really tell the story. And I wanted to tell the story from an African American point of view, or from a Black man point of view, a person. I feel like the narrative and the story from jazz are usually told by people that don't look like the musicians. That was what I wanted to. It was one of my other big things that I wanted to do with Jazz Groupies, is tell the story in a cooler way.
And at this period, are you thinking this is just going to be a platform for yourself alone, or are you thinking Jazz Groupies can be a collective of groupies?
No, it was just me. It was just it was just for fun. It was just a passion project. That's all it was, man. I started on February 8th. That was my dad's birthday. And
Yeah.
February 8th, 2013, I launched Jazz Groupies, and it was just me. I had Stephanie Jones. She was a writer in New York. She was a college student at the time.
Yeah.
She's gone on to write for Downbeat magazines, but I had met her through a Craigslist ad, I think, because I wanted to write articles. I wanted to have articles on the website where, if Robert Glasper had a new album come out,
Yeah.
I would also be able to. He can go to Jazz Times and Downbeat, the big magazines, but I also wanted to have a publication where he could talk to that other side of jazz, the other fans that don't read Downbeat magazine, and speak in a more casual way about the music and the culture. So no, that was it. It was just me, and I worked with a few writers, and I had some people doing artwork. I had a guy doing artwork for me, and another lady that was helping him and me, we were doing a lot of promoting and trying to get magazine, just press. We were trying to get press about Jazz Groupie, so I did a lot of magazine articles. So she helped reach out to different publications to try to get ads about Jazz Groupies and spread the word.
And it sounds to me like you were just going through a period of embracing not only the music, but I guess the culture around jazz, and not only embracing it but enhancing it as well in your own spaces.
Yeah, because I wanted to be able to have dialogue about it. I wanted, I wanted the people that were at the shows. My vision was, if I'm at a Robert Glasper show or any type of jazz show, Moonchild or whatever, I
Yeah.
want all the people. My vision was all the people that were in the audience. I would love for those people to be on Jazz Groupies Instagram in the comments, talking to one another, or just making, you know, commentary, or talking about their experiences. Maybe they seen this artist play in another city or state. Just have like a community. I
Yeah.
wanted all those people in following Jazz Groupies to be in the comments. So I would go to these shows. So now I started going to the shows, and I would leave Jazz Groupies cards everywhere, or I would try to talk to the artist after the show and
Yeah.
get, the interview for the website and for Instagram and Facebook and things like that. So that was all. It was just literally just, I found this new side of jazz, this new thing that was really cool to me, and I just wanted to just share it with everyone else. That was it. It's like the same way people do a food blog page where they go to different restaurants and try food, and share it on their IG. That's basically what I wanted to
Yeah.
do. I just wanted to go to jazz clubs, go to as many jazz clubs as possible, and share it, and share these artists that a lot of people don't know about.
And how do we then evolve and get back into making music under this new concept that you've come up with?
So as Jazz Groupies to me started gaining a little bit of popularity and the community started to grow, I started to go to different cities. One of the things I wanted to do was expand to where I'm going to cities that were not known for jazz, but finding that maybe they had a couple of jazz spots, go to their city and kind of profile the city. But then I ended up back in Houston too. So now I'm back in Houston, and I'm like, okay, Houston has a lot of great musicians from here: Beyonce, Travis Scott, Robert Glasper, Brian Michael Cox, Joe Sample. I mean, you could go on,
Yeah.
all the hip hop, the Scarface, Rap a Lot, UGK. I can keep going about Houston musicians. But I said, there's this. Where's the jazz scene in Houston with all these amazing musicians? Is there a jazz scene? So I spend a lot of time going to different jazz shows in Houston and just trying to get myself kind of ingrained into the Houston jazz culture. And we're talking like 2014 or 15 now. Um, Maybe it's 2017, actually 16, 17.
Yeah.
So while I'm in Houston, I'm at a show and I see a guy perform by the name of Stephen Reshort at the House of Blues in Houston. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Like, he just blew me away. But while I was at that show, I remember the moment I said, Houston jazz and Houston hip hop has never really intersected. Like as much as they're just kind of separate. And in most cities, I mean, jazz is just kind of on its own, and in most genres on its own. But I was like, what if we fuse the two? And I said, I don't think that's ever been done.
Yeah.
And then I said, what if I put out a jazz mixtape? Because at the time I was in the experimental phase of Jazzgroupiez, so I was always looking for different things to different elements to get people drawn in. So I was like, what if I do a jazz mixtape, like almost the same as a hip hop mixtape, but I just take all my favorite jazz songs, Robert Glasper songs and stuff, and mix them up and put out, just like a free CD or download that I give out. So, but then I said, what if I take that mixtape, chop up some beats, and put a real saxophonist on top of a chopped up sample of a jazz song?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think nobody's doing that either, you know. And so, like out of nowhere, like probably a week later, I told my wife. I said, we talked. I told her, I said, hey, I'm married. By the end, I'm married, and I said, hey, I'm gonna go buy a drum machine and start putting out some music. And I'm gonna put out a
I'm
jazz.
sure she
I'm gonna
was
put.
shocked.
Yeah, she knew. She knows I'm crazy like that. So yeah, I went and bought a drum machine, an MPC. I previously sold my MPC 8 to 10 years earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went and bought a new one. I was amazed at how, because I hadn't, mind you, I hadn't even kept up with what's the latest in music technology. Like I was so done with it, I didn't have any interest. And so when I started going and looking at music equipment again and seeing how the drum machine that I started with like 10 years earlier had evolved,
Yeah.
and everything now was software driven, and you had to have a laptop too. I never had all that. So I was amazed. I was like, wow, this stuff is come a
Yeah.
long way. Like you could do so much. Like, now I could take a sample and chop it up and have it on the computer screen and all. Like what? So I got so into that, and that's how I started. I literally bought a drum machine, and I taught myself how to work it again, and took about 6 months, and I started just playing around making beats again. And I fell back in love with making beats again.
Wow.
So fell in love with making beats again. But this time I was making the best part about this time around. I was making the beats that only I wanted to hear. I
Yeah.
wasn't making beats with the intention of sending it
Yes.
off
Yeah.
to artists, or
Yeah.
sending it off to a rapper and hopefully, oh well, let me keep my fingers crossed, maybe they're gonna like it. No, that was the best part about rediscovering and falling in love with it again, is I didn't care about, because I was doing it for fun, and I wasn't doing it with the intention of this is going to be my career. No, it was just fun, and that changed everything for me, because I always just wanted to chop up samples, but nobody would, in the early 2000s, and when you're trying to sell beats and get placements. Well, back then people were not going to pay to clear a sample, so
Yeah.
record labels and things like that, they would, nobody would want to touch a sample as much as, so that was what was great to me, is I was like, I'm making the music that I want. I don't care who likes it. I literally didn't care if anybody liked it or not. I didn't let anybody hear it. I was making music just for myself. I wasn't going and playing it for my wife. I wasn't going and playing
Yeah.
it for my sisters. I wasn't looking for validation from anybody. And that was what changed everything for me, is to make music with no motives. Just the only motive is for my feeling. I want to feel good when I make it.
And that's the beauty of a passion project, I guess. You don't
That
care.
is.
You
Yeah,
don't
that
care.
was it. That was it, man. And I was so thankful that I found my way the second time around. And so yeah, so 2016, 17 is when I kind of started back producing again. Still hadn't figured out what I was gonna do with the mixtape, and that idea kind of started to fade. Um, because I started falling in love. As I started falling back in love with making beats, I was like, no, I want to make beats. I want to make an album. I don't want to make a mixtape. I want to make the beats.
Proper album.
Yeah.
And would I be correct in saying that a large part of the Jazzgroupiez brand is based around the power of collaboration?
Yeah, because yes. So in that, the only way I'm gonna be successful is with the musicians that I collaborate with. I'm not gonna say the only way, but the big part of right now is what got me to where I am now is the musicians that have been helping me out as far as me, because the other thing, it was really frightening to me to ask these musicians because I had never worked with these type of musicians. I've worked with beat makers in the past, and I worked with beat makers, singers, and rappers. But to work with a guy that like Stephen Richard, a guy that played with Grover Washington Jr., a guy that went to Europe to teach jazz, like these guys know their stuff, so and I'm working with samples. So I know a saxophone is gonna be kind of hard to play over a pitch down sample, to match pitches and tones and stuff. That's pretty difficult sometimes, depending on how deep you try to tune everything. So, and then also, I know a lot of musicians that don't like samples being out of tune. So that was a lot of things that I was worried about. But Stephen Richard, when I asked him and I sent him some of the beats I had been working on for the last 6 months while I was just trying to find my sound and stuff, and he heard the beats and he called me right away. I emailed him and he said, "Hey man, I'm down. Let me know when you're gonna be in the studio. I'm there." And that was so. So now I'm for the first time out of my room at home, because I didn't even have a studio space. I was just making beats in my lap on the drum machine. So now I'm leaving, taking the beats from home that nobody's really heard, bringing them to a studio again for the first time in like 10 years. And Steven came and he played on every beat that I played. And that's how we started making albums, man. That's how we started putting out Purple Sax. I made Melanizance first, and I didn't really collaborate with a lot of musicians on Melanizance because I really wanted to test the water. I wanted to just put out a small project. It was kind of like I wanted to do a case study almost to see will people like this.
Will it work?
And that's what Melanizance 1 was. I really honestly thought that was going to be it. Thought I was going to do Melanizance 1, and I wouldn't do anything else after that. And I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop.
So when I first discovered your music, I think I first listened to Red Sax, right? And then I listened to Melanizance. And I remember just thinking I should have started here because the sound seemed like it had evolved from the first project.
Oh yeah, it did big time. And I'm trying to. That's one of the things I'm trying to get back to, is the Melanizance 1 days, because what happened after Melanizance 1, right? So Melanizance 1 was literally me, a drum machine, a laptop, and a record player and some records.
Yeah.
At home, and just chopping up records. I use Fiverr, a website called Fiverr, where you can find different musicians. At the time, I was using Fiverr. I was looking. Somebody had told me to look on Fiverr for artwork, so I was looking on Fiverr to get somebody to do some artwork for. I think it was for the album cover and some other things I was trying to do with Jazzgroupiez. And while I was on Fiverr, I saw that they had musicians. Like a saxophonist, you could pay so many dollars for a saxophonist to play on top of your song. And I was like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Let me try that, So on Melanizance 1, I think on one song, I had a saxophonist, Jazz Anarchist. I think his name is Jazz Anarchist or something. Jazz Anarchy. I've been looking for him. But anyway, but I just tried it out. I was like, let's see how this works, So I tried it out for a song. Like, this pretty cool. I said, so I could just send this song to somebody in another country. A guy in Germany, for $20, I could pay him to play on the beat. And what made that part about it so cool is, it was more of a business transaction. So he didn't mind he didn't mind me sending him a sample that
Yes.
was pitched down, and he
Yeah.
also didn't mind. He didn't care what I did with his sax
Yeah.
part afterwards. So I was able to be free with, like, so a lot of times I will take he would play a sax riff on a song. I would take that sax riff and then chop it up, put filters on it and transform the sax sound too. And I didn't have to worry about him being mad. It was a business transaction. So that was another great thing that I discovered that helped my sound too. Because what happened once I started making like red sax and getting further into jazz groupies, I started working with more, collaborating more with established musicians and moving away from using Fiverr. And what I found is that when you start collaborating with musicians, now you have to compromise with what another musician wants, and that's fair. That's you're supposed to
Yeah.
when you're collaborating. But that wasn't how Jazz Groupie Sound started. And so, although I love collaborating with people, and I think it's amazing, and I think musicians should, I think for me and for Jazz Groupies to get back to the essence of the sound, I have to scale back on collaborations and go back to the original formula. Millennials
I
want,
guess it's also mainly just a clash of creatives, because when you have a person contributing as much to the project, they also have a lot more they would like to bring that is directed to
yeah,
their sound.
absolutely, and that's only fair. And also, these same musicians, they've worked very hard to build their brand.
Yeah.
They've gone to school to be a musician. They spent hours and hours practicing when nobody was around. So yeah, they have the right that they want their music to sound a certain way, but that's not how jazz groupies sound developed. And
Mm.
so I will continue to collaborate, but I'm trying to scale back right now because I don't want to move too far away from the jazz groupie sound and get too complicated. I had a friend of mine tell me, think he was listening to Melanizance 1 and Purple Sax and Red Sax, and then comparing to Melanizance 3. And he's like, don't get me wrong, Melanizance 3, all these that's a great project. He said it's an amazing project, but he said musicians are always looking to level up sometimes, and
Yeah.
sometimes just keep the formula like Kentucky Fried Chicken. Don't change the recipe.
Yeah, if it works, there's no need, honestly.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that I've been trying to work through right now is scaling back on collaborations and getting back to the origins and the roots of how I started. So because over time I've bought a lot more equipment. As I started discovering, so now I have like 3 or 4 drum machines, and so I'm putting all that stuff in the closet, and I'm only pulling out the original drum machine and the record player I started with.
And I guess talking of the collaborations, a large part of it has been, a large part of meeting the collaborators has been through social media. Just tell me a bit of how social media has worked to your advantage, I guess.
Oh yeah, that saying that people, people joke and say, if they got rid of Instagram today, some of y'all wouldn't be nothing. Um,
Yeah.
I can't 100% say that's true about me, but it's been big for me because social media for me is everything because of 2 things. For one, I'm an introvert, so I'm not a social person.
Mm.
So I'm not gonna be at a club advertising my product as much as I can do it online. That's just not my skill set.
Mm.
And for two, I'm a producer, and I'm not a performer, right? So
Mm.
I'm not gonna be able to gain fans at a show because I'm not at a show. I'm not performing. Like you can't say, "Oh man, I saw Jazz Groupies," and now I'm a fan. No, I'm not performing at shows yet. So I had to use social media. Instagram in particular was kind of helped me gain a lot of success, and so I used a lot of IG ads, sponsored ads, and during the pandemic, I was um I was at a time when I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna put out maybe 1 or 2 more Jazz Groupies projects. I'm not sure where I'm going at this point. My following is great, but I spent a lot of money putting out Jazz Groupies records. I'm not,
Mm.
and I, with streaming, I had to figure out a way how I'm gonna balance things out. So during the pandemic, this was early 2020. I said, I've never tried to advertise outside of the U.S. I only spend a lot of time advertising Jazzgroupiez, the music in the U.S. I said, what if I try to do some sponsored IG ads in different countries? And that changed everything for me. I mean, there was literally it was the spark that I needed. I did an ad for Purple Sax. Purple Sax had been out like a year, but I did a sponsored IG ad, and I think around March 2020 for Purple Sax, and an album that had been out a year, but I did it in Europe and South Africa, a lot of African countries, everywhere except for the U.S., and it just went crazy. I mean, it wasn't a viral moment in the sense of the internet, it being the talk of the town or trending or something, but it was my personal viral moment. Because my DMs went crazy, for the first time ever. I'm getting all these people. That's how I saw from that post. That's how Saul Matiope contacted me, and it was the song was Hallelujah, and that's the streams started going crazy. For the first time, I made Apple Music, iTunes jazz charts in South Africa. Saul Matiope is the one who told me about that, and it was like the stars had aligned. I mean, there was like the perfect ad, the perfect post, the perfect time because of the pandemic. Everybody was at home.
Also, people had time to consume new stuff.
People had time. I tell people a lot of me and Neota Parker, and me and Saul and Neota, we all met around that same time period during the pandemic, and the pandemic was great for a lot of musicians and creators and writers and podcasters. The pandemic probably kept a lot of people's dreams alive.
Yeah, and before we go further into your taken into the South African music scene, just to touch a bit, you spoke about streaming. What do you think has been because I think we do see the benefits of the new streaming platforms. Your music can get to audiences much broader in a much quicker period, but there are so many things that they've changed with the streaming, especially when it comes to the financing and profitability of the music. Do you see streaming in a positive sense or not?
Yes and no. I think I'm leaning as I learn more on how to strategize. I am more accepting of streaming because you have to also realize, I think, yes, we should get paid more per stream.
Yeah.
But then also I think it's so oversaturated too, because it's so much easier for people to record and release music. There's so much music out there. It's almost like, it's like there's no scarcity. The supply and demand ain't nowhere to be found. Because it's just so much music out there. There's so many artists on there, that put out one album and they'll never put out another album. So I think that's what's crazy about the streaming. But you got to also think about too. Here's the benefit of it. I think in a lot of ways. Let's say I'm Anita Baker. Let's say I'm an artist that hadn't put out an album or toured or anything since the 90s.
Yeah.
If without streaming, if they hadn't put out an album, their revenue is cut off in a lot of ways.
Completely.
Streaming is a whole new way of revenue for artists that didn't put out albums 20 years ago. Look, I mean, like the songs that I produced in early 2000s that, the CD sales stopped, the royalties stopped. Now I got a whole new stream of income from royalties from songs that I produced 20 years ago. And here's the other thing that I try to put in perspective with streaming. I heard Isaac Hayes Jr. say this. There's, 8 billion people in the world. There's probably, I think he was saying the stats, I could be wrong, but let's just say there's 1 billion people that have a smartphone, but there's maybe 500 million of that have Spotify. Well, that number is going to continue to grow.
Yeah, true.
So that gap is going to close where there's going to, all of our streams, in 8 years, 10 years, 20 years, they're going to, hopefully if you're putting out the right music,
they're just
as
gonna
more
increase.
people, as more people have Spotify and Apple Music, then hopefully our streams are going to grow. And the other great thing about streaming is, music supervisors use it a lot. Like that's how me and Saul and Tando J ended up on the HBO feature, because a music supervisor heard our song streaming on Apple Music. So there's benefits of it, I think, but the majority of people that upload their music on a streaming platform probably don't really reap the benefits. I mean, there's very little financial benefit for probably the average creator because there's just so much music out there.
And I think for us as audiences, it's even more beneficial because you speak of music from the past being an income stream for an artist, but for an audience, streaming platforms are an avenue to kind of rediscover sounds. And for much younger audiences, they're listening to this stuff as though it's completely new.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like my kids, my daughter's 6, and it's what I think it's called Vivo. She's watching 90s R&B.
Yeah.
So I mean that's amazing because it keeps the culture alive, and it just helps to keep our culture thriving and gives kids the education they need behind the music too. A lot of times they'll respect it more.
And I guess in concluding our conversation, just to touch a bit on how the reception rather from a South African audience to your music, how has that been in general? I know you still feel you don't understand what's happening, but how does it feel being appreciated, I guess, across shores? And do you see yourself wanting to continue working and collaborating with more South African artists?
Oh yeah, I'm always I love, I work with so many people. Saul Matiope, F. Deezes, so many artists from South Africa that I've been collaborating with over the last year, maybe 2 years now.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing thing to, spend so much of your adult life and you finally found it's like you finally found a place where you fit in, where your music fits perfectly. Yeah. Because the more I started receiving a love from South Africa, the more I just started searching more to learn more about the South African culture. Just little things like braai, and I can't wait to go out. I can't wait to visit. And I'd never heard of that. We call it barbecue here. So just different little small things that I keep learning and picking up from the culture. But you have to remember for us in America, we got to understand this is where we're from.
Yeah.
So it's for me, that's the most perfect thing to connect with the people where you're really from. Yeah. Then no one had ever taught me and exposed me to that. So it's like I'm able to get exposed to my people, and that's how I feel. It's like family. I truly feel like it's family. I've been trying to, the pandemic shut a lot of things down in the height of everything. I was trying to come out there, but during the pandemic, but they had all the travel restrictions. And then life kind of changed for me. I started, now I'm in the transition of moving across the country. So, but my goal is, 2023, before that year's up, I will be in South Africa maybe twice, I've been getting a lot, we haven't performed before. I haven't performed before, but maybe once I tried at the House of Blues with Steven. But there's been, people have been asking if I wanted to try to come out there to perform. So I've talked to a lot of people. I have all my band members kind of on standby, because I told them, I said, I keep getting emails and requests. And at some point, we're going to have to go and perform in South Africa. And I want that to be my first performance,
And just briefly, were you surprised at the music, the amount of music and the artistry of our musicians this side?
I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised as far as the talent level. I'm
Yeah,
surprised. What surprises me is I think the reach should be bigger.
yeah,
I think like when I started listening, like me and Oscar and Bo, we talked a while back about
yeah,
collaborating. When I heard of Soulful House, I was blown away. I'm like, why isn't this being played everywhere? Like
yeah.
why don't we hear this in the States? Why when I go out, I don't hear Soulful House or Deep House? Like
And
that's what
we actually take it for granted this side that deep house is not so
man,
mainstream in
y'all
other countries.
yeah, man, it's truly y'all, it's an amazing thing. And so I wasn't surprised at the talent out there. I'm surprised at the fact that it's not, the reach isn't bigger and
Yeah,
it isn't
yeah,
everywhere in the States. But also the musicians that I've been working with out there, I'm also same thing. I'm surprised that so many of those musicians aren't working with big name artists in the States. Like F Deezus is one of the guys that I work with a lot. Like I bought my first beat. I'm a producer. I never bought a beat. I bought my first beat in my life about a month ago from F
yeah,
Deezus. And I'm like, F Deezus he should be here working with Nicki Minaj. Like
yeah,
serious. He should be working with Drake.
yeah. That's
So
how
that
good it is.
that's what I hope, and I'm not a big name artist, but I would hope that somehow from just our collaborations, maybe they can get a little bit more exposure. And of course, I would too. But I just want all these artists that I work with out in South Africa to thrive, man. I just think the world of them. I think the world of everyone out there. I get so many messages. I've never met so many like beautiful people that from the core, like
Yeah, yeah,
in America, we just get so caught up materialistic and we lose sight of our culture. And like talking to people like Saul Matiope, to be such a young man, but to understand so much about his ancestry, so
yeah.
much about, like to see so many people like that. Man, it's a beautiful thing. It's helped me mature, believe it or not, in a lot of ways. Just the friendships and the people that I've been able to talk to from South Africa. I mean, it's not a day that goes by right now that I don't talk to someone from South Africa, to be a text, WhatsApp, IG inbox. Like it's about 3 or 4 guys and ladies that we just have normal dialogue relationships just over the last 2 years because of music. And I think that's what it's all about, is making that human connection with people on the whole other side of the world and sharing our culture. And I know their mothers, their kids, they know mine. Like
Yeah,
that's just crazy. It's a crazy thing to me, and it's a beautiful thing though.
yeah, man. And big shout out to Mwaku as well, because I know he's played a large part in helping you
he just
sound this
called me.
out.
He
Did
literally just
he?
called me. Like
Really?
while we're talking, like I'm talking in the last 3 minutes, I just missed a call from him. I told him we talked. I told him after the interview I talked. So yeah, and Waco, yeah, we talked. Me and him, we talked. We used to
Yeah,
before
he's such a
before
nice
things got
guy.
busy. Yeah, we used to talk weekly, but life has changed for us. But
Yeah,
we're gonna catch up today. But yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. It's just it's unexplainable. I'm happy. It's a life changing thing, not just for the fact that you know the people in South Africa support my music, but no, it's the fact that I discovered some of the
yeah.
I'm able to communicate and have relationships with some of the most amazing people on this planet that I never knew about. That's what's crazy about it and beautiful about it all.
Oh man, Todd. Firstly, thank you a lot for agreeing to have this chat. I think not only for whoever gets to listen to this, but for myself as well. I thought it's very important to get to talk to you and get to know the man behind Jazz Groupies and just the thinking around it. So thank you very much for doing this, and I'm a big fan of the sound, and I can't wait to hear more sounds from you and more collaborations, I guess.
Hey man, thank you, and I love what you're doing, and man, just keep it up, man. I appreciate what you're doing. The culture needs this. Where we're gonna be
Yeah,
without people telling the stories. You know, the musicians are great, but the people telling the stories and documenting the experience are just as important as the music. So I appreciate what you're doing, man, and I'm honored that you would even invite me on your platform. So thank you so much.